This is Ryan Haines with Authority Media, talking to Paul Struhsaker, Executive Director of the Wireless Power Consortium, and we're going to dig into all things Qi 2.
Great. Pleasure to be here this morning.
Yes, thank you for taking the time on the last day of CES 2023.
It was a great show, so great way for me to wrap it up.
And it's also been a busy show. So for people who haven't had a chance to keep up with everything announced with Qi 2, what is it?
Qi 2 is the final global unification of consumer wireless charging, especially around cell phones, earbuds, and in the future watches, but right now cell phones. So finally the worlds of Apple, Samsung, Huawei, Oppo, they finally all coalesce into a single unified standard for the globe. So charging will be easier in your car and at home.
And we love that because we spend a lot of time writing about how many different standards there are. And so what differentiates it from Qi? Is it speeds, alignment?
First of all and foremost, efficiency. It is a lot more efficient in energy transfer, and the regulatory agencies around the world are starting to, as you know, with the big energy crunch, they're starting to say, look, we need to make sure that wireless energy transfer approaches wired. And in fact, that's what Qi 2 gets you. It gets you very, very much higher energy transfer efficiency. Second thing is authentication. As you know, in any industry, there are a lot of counterfeit products and knockoff products where we're transferring power, and that can damage your device. The last thing you want is your $1,000 smartphone damaged by a $20 charger, right? And then so we have authentication to make sure that only approved chargers talk to approved receivers, phones. And then of course the last thing is in general this interoperability, the globalization part, which we already talked about.
So with that certification, because of course, like you said, we saw plenty of products that said they work with Qi, but they're not Qi certified. Will it be like all products that work with Qi 2 will be certified?
Yeah, if you have a Qi 2 device, it will require certification and it will require authentication. And the other part of it, the Wireless Power Consortium, the logo and the use of Qi and charging, Qi and powering, and all those things are compatible with Qi. Those are our logos. That's our logo. And we have now, and we hadn't in the past, we're now enforcing our logo. So when we find people who are promoting their products as Qi on, say, JD.com or Amazon.com, we actually are now having them delisted. So that's another part of really what makes a standard. A standard's based on three things, right? One is quality. You have to have quality to have any kind of standard that's worth anything. Second thing is obviously you have to promote it. That's what you and I are doing here. The third thing is enforcement. Because if you don't sit down and enforce your brand, what kind of brand do you have? So that's really a big change that we've done at the Wireless Power Consortium. And I think it's important, and we needed to do it with the launch of Qi 2 to really help. Like we say, we're globalizing, and the entire world of smartphones will be powered by it. We need to make sure that only those things that are certified are sold.
Right, perfect. So like the key benefits would be safety, convenience as everything globalizes. What else can consumers expect to see as they move to Qi 2 products instead of the original Qi standard?
Well, first of all, faster charging. In general, not only is Qi more efficient at charging, it has generally a higher amount of energy that it can transfer consistently. So it's one thing to say, hey, I charge at 50 watts, right? But real battery charging, you'd have to cycle out of 50 and down to almost zero, or you'd harm the battery. Qi 2 is designed to be much more efficient in maximizing energy transfer for the period of time. So that's the other thing that happened out there is there was a lot of products that came out and they weren't specifically Qi certified, and they would have very high power, and then people would wonder why, well, my battery life's just been cut in half on my phone. Well, the answer was you were overcharging it.
Right.
You were rapidly charging it. And I'm sure you've heard about this from other things too, other interviews about you have to be careful on how you charge a battery to have a good battery life.
Yeah, and so we know that as of right now, the speed for Qi 2 is still 15 watts.
Correct.
Are we expecting to see that increase as more brands adopt Qi 2 and you have time to put a little more research into increasing speed but maintaining the safety?
Yes, and so the safety is done by something called foreign object detection, which has been improved in Qi 2. And foreign object detections make sure that we're using frequencies that are also used to melt metal, and
Right.
so consequently, metal keys, coins, and those kind of things, if subjected to the energy, could end up harming somebody, burning someone's hand, or burning through your tabletop or your console of your car. So there is better and improved FOD, foreign object deployment. But the other thing, Qi on the roadmap, and it's going to follow this initial Qi 2 deployment. About 18 months or so after this, we will actually be having what's called fast charging, but it'll be Qi 2.1, and that will come out, and along with it, the improvements necessary to ensure higher power charging is safe, but also so that Qi can approach some other devices that are out there. For example, tablets for sure could use a little higher charging power, but again, we got to do everything in stepwise so it's safe and there's no issues for the consumer, right? Don't jump the gun.
Right. And I mean, we know that Qi 2 is going to expand outside of smartphones. It'll start with smartphones, but how do you see it adopting wearables? Because we've spent plenty of time talking about smartwatches with their proprietary connections.
Yes.
And how much of a headache that can be.
Well, Qi 2 already, most of the little cases that you have for your earbuds,
Mm-hmm.
those will be built to be compliant with Qi 2, right? Most people will, and just because it's so convenient to have it that way. Watch is a little different. The form factor is the form factor. So the other item on our roadmap that's coming up is we're taking a look at how can we get the entire crazy world of smartwatches, get the major players in a room and begin agreeing on a standard. And the value of it is always this. It's one thing to own 10% of the market and have a volume, but if the volume becomes 100% and you get to have 10% out of that, standards exist for two things: interoperability and cost.
Yeah.
The cost of the ecosystem, right? And so when you have your own ecosystem, your prices are high. You can expect Qi 2, because it's a unify charging for across the globe. We were talking about next year, 370 million smartphones will likely be Qi 2 certified, and 600 million chargers, right? And so when we look at that, that's the difference between, say, it's bifurcated right now. Apple has certain things that are proprietary. There are some things that Huawei and others do that are proprietary. What that happens now is that, everyone had a smaller cut. You can actually expect to see wireless charging become much more cost effective.
And mentioning Apple, we know that MagSafe is served as the basis for Qi 2 as far as the magnetic alignment and making sure that your phone or your headphones are in the right position on your charger. But we also know that Qi 2 is going to adopt a slightly different magnetic layout. So
no, I wouldn't say that. I think if you carefully look at the specification, I think you'll find that a lot of it is designed so that there's compatibility. Okay, and the thing is, Apple reserves the right to explain their roadmap and everything that they're doing. But I would tell you that everyone's working on this for a reason. If you wonder, well, why is Apple in here doing this, or why is Samsung, and why was the vote for this unanimous? The vote on the membership was unanimous to move this forward all the way, right? Well, the answer is the regulatory agencies out there in the world, like the EU. In about 2 years, the EU is going to name a sole standard for wireless charging for smartphones. They'll probably several years later do the same for smart watches. So it was in everyone's best interest to get together, get to the table, and realize, why don't we control the standard in the supply chain and then have our standard become the de facto standard? For example, when Europe rules on the standard that they want across Europe. And you're very familiar with the Thunder USB-C thing that happened, right? Guess what? Same thing's going to happen. So there was a big motivation for everyone to come together and do this. And I'll tell you what, that's going to really drive the smartwatch side too. There'll be a big motivation because either A, we all work together and we work our supply chains and everything else and do this, and as an industry move, or the governments will dictate to us our supply chains. And I think you'll find these are the largest manufacturing companies in the world. They don't like their supply chains dictated to them. Trust me, I walk among the elephants, and think of me as a peacekeeper, as the executive director. I have to work with everybody, and it's not really a political job because mostly it's scientific.
Mhm.
But you got to get everybody to work, and some people have to give here and give there, and there are different things that change. But then everybody wins in the end, and so that's really the nature of my job.
What other challenges do you see for Qi 2 going forward as it unifies, and obviously if it's named as the standard, which seems likely?
Seems like it.
I guess what other challenges do you see lying ahead in terms of speed, efficiency?
I think Qi, as it stands, which is one segment of the market, we also have Qi, our new kitchen standard that is going to come out. Okay, and we also have LEV, light electric vehicles, that are coming out. We're going to piggyback off of those technologies. The only wall I see happening is, will certain regions of the world try to regulate where you can operate in frequency or different power levels, and suddenly we don't really have a global standard. We have to repiece it back into multiple regional standards, and there is a concern around that. Let's face it. There's some trade wars brewing here and there, and one of my jobs and the job of our members. Remember, we're a member-driven organization, but our members working regionally, have to make sure that the regulatory agencies don't go out. And I get it. There's trade wars going on, but what you don't want to do is end up having to have regionalized systems, because that returns you back to a situation we've tried to remedy, right?
Right.
So it is a concern, and we watch it every day. We actually have a regulatory working group with, there's a China working group, a Japan working group, a Europe working group, US and North America, or say North America, South America group. And they're all working together to make sure that when their government regulatory agencies are talking about power or emissions or what frequencies you work on, we represent our interests to those regions.
Excellent. And kind of bringing it all together, when will we start to see Qi 2 products arrive in terms of smartphones, followed by?
We believe that they're going to be out for holiday 2023, the first part of them, and that's the ramp, and that it'll dominate 2024. At about the same time, our new kitchen standard Qi will ramp in 2024 and come out in 2025.
Okay, so we might start seeing
these really
Qi
cool wireless, powered through your granite, powered through your countertop. You're going to start seeing these appliances, no more wires. And of course, they'll be in high-end appliances to start, just like charging was in high-end phones to start. Right? But it'll be great. No more wires, no more mess, no more fuss. I think it's going to really take off. At least if you look at the crowds, the CES, our engagement at this meeting was fantastic. Just everyone, oh, finally, I'm going to be able to put my phone in a car and it's going to charge properly, right? And oh, wow, I've never even thought about not having to worry about my appliances and my cords because it's such a pain. So there's a lot of draw. So we're actually solving problems that people need solved, as opposed to, and you see this all the time, I've got some crazy tech, I hope someone buys it. And I'll remind you that, already this year, 800 million devices are Qi certified. And there's probably 1.5 devices that use the technology that we use. Billion, sorry, not million. Billion. Anyway, sorry, yeah, I couldn't help myself. But anyway, it's already very, very successful. The thing is, we want to make it more successful, keep it successful, and make it better for the consumer all the way around. That's my job. That's the job of our standards organization.
That's perfect. And I just want to thank you again for your time.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time to stop by this morning.
Oh, it was great. I really appreciate the time you've given us. And, to everyone out there, I hope you buy a new Qi 2 device here in the coming years.
We know we'll have as many as we can get our hands on.
Perfect. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Take care.
So for Authority Media, I'm Ryan Haines, and you can keep up with all of our CES 2023 content on AndroidAuthority.com and the Authority Media YouTube channel.